We continue now at the top of Daf Samech Beis Amud Aleph in Mesechet Sanhedrin. This is Sanhedrin Daf 62a. On the previous summit, there was a machlokas amoroim between Abai and Rava. Let's say a person serves avodah zarah me'ahava u'me'yira. What that means to say is it's from the love or fear of a person. It's not because he's accepting the avodah zarah as a god. So is the person chayiv in that situation, or is the person potter? Abai says chayiv. Rashi in the previous summit explains it's chayiv. Both if he does it on purpose with a warning, he would get the death penalty. If he does it by mistake, he's going to bring a carbon in that situation. And Rava says in a situation of me'ahava u'me'yira, the person is potter. And Abai is in the middle of bringing a proof from a Braisa. The Braisa brings the Shita of Rebbe, talking about a Kohen Gadol who worships Avodah Zarah. Kohen Gadol worships Avodah Zarah, brings a carbon, and says Rebbe in the Braisa that we're talking about a situation of Shigagas Maisa. And the question is, what exactly does Shigagas Maisa mean? And the Gemara is in the middle of suggesting maybe Shigagas Maisa means, let's say the person bows down to a statue of a king, and in such a situation, as the Gemara now continues, the Gemara said on the previous Amud, well, if he accepted that as a god, so then that's considered like Avodah Zarah. V'lo kiblei aleh balo, and if he did not accept it as a god, if he did not accept this particular king, so lo klomo, so that's nothing, so that wouldn't be an issue anyway. Elolav me'avu me'yira, so rather, says Abai, is it not exactly our case? It's me'avu me'yira, and it's considered to be serving Avodah Zarah. And Rashi explains, V'lo kibla aleh beloa elo l'chavad hamelech, let's say he just did it out of honor of the king, he wasn't accepting it as a god. Hishtacha velo, that's why he bowed to it. Lo klumhu, so that's nothing. Lo echavin l'shem avodas kochavim, because he didn't have in mind for Avodah Zarah. And so therefore Abai says, Elalav, rather, isn't the Brisa saying, Sha'avad avodas kochavim me'ava u'miyiras adam. What happened is, he served the Avodah Zarah me'ava u'miyiras adam. He did it because of the love or fear of man. Kesavar shemuter lasos, which he thought was mutter. V'hai omer mutter ki hai gavna the yoda leila isra avodas kochavim b'chol avodas shalom. Now in this situation of omer mutter, he understands, he knows there's a prohibition of Avodah Zarah. He understands all of the different ways that a person can violate. Lav helim dover kari la, but that's not called helim dover. That was the other term that was used in the Brisa. Aval bishanelam mimenu isra hava v'yira. Now, even though he didn't know about the prohibition of ava and yira, she'ein zu migufa isra, but that's not the fundamental part of the isra. That's why that can be referred to as shigagas maisa. It's only called helim dover elim kenelam mimenu ikra avodas kochavim. It would be called helim dover if the main idea of Avodah Zarah he didn't know about, bi'achas me'avodah, let's say one of the ways of service, kisavar she'avodah zu mutter la, for example, he thought that this particular avodah is mutter. And the Gemara continues, V'Rava Amar Lach, and Rava will say to you, how do we understand Shigagas Maisa in that Brisa? Lo, no, it's not. It does not mean Me'avu Me'ira, rather Ba'omer Mutter. Rather what it means is Omer Mutter. And Rashi says, V'Rava Amar Lach, lo have a Shigagas Maisa hachi. That's not what Shigagas Maisa is in the Brisa. It's not Me'avu Me'ira. Ela Ba'omer Mutter lavod avodas kochavim. The case of the Brisa is the person he says that it's Mutter to serve Avodah Zarah. Kesavar ein avodas kochavim b'Torah. He thinks there's no Isser of Avodah Zarah in the Torah. But the Gemara says, how can that be? Omer mutter hainu helam dover. Isn't Omer mutter the exact same thing as helam dover? And Rashi says, Omer mutter hainu helam dover uvaha afilu rabbanan modu. That's the case that the rabbanan even admit to. So how can you say that Rebbe is talking about Omer mutter? And the Gemara continues and answers, Ba'omer mutter lagamri. The Omer mutter case, that's a situation where he says Avodah Zarah is totally mutter. That's what Rebbe is talking about. But the Helam Dover of the Rabbanon, that's Kiyam Mixas Uvital Mixas. That's when he accepts some, but he nullifies some. And Rashi explains, Umeshani, Omer mutter de ka'amina hainu de ka'akar lo lagamri. Again, Omer mutter, what I'm saying, that means to say he totally uproots the idea of Avodah Zarah. But helam davar kiyam mixas uvital mixas could go in yesh avodas kochavim b'Torah. For example, a person might say that he agrees, he knows there's Avodah Zarah in the Torah, shalol is boach v'shalol akater, but that would mean not to sacrifice, not to burn to the Avodah Zarah. Aval ha'mishtachav mutter, but he might think that bowing is mutter. That would be a case of kiyam mixas and bitul mixas. And the Gemara continues, Tani Rabbi Zakkai, Kamed Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Zakkai taught before Rabbi Yochanan, Zibeach, V'kiter, V'nisach, V'ishtachav. Let's say a person sacrifices and burns, and he gives libations, and he bows to the Avodah Zarah, Behelam Echad, and that's all with one mistake, with one not understanding, Eino Chayiv El Achas. So in that situation, he's only going to be Chayiv to bring one carbon. And Rashi explains, Eino Chayiv El Achas, V'chol Avodoseh Ba'azara Achas, and it's all with one warning. Lo Savdem, don't worship them. Hilkach Ein Kan Chiluk Chat. Therefore, there's no distinction in terms of carbon chatas. He's only going to bring one carbon chatas. That's what Rabbi Zakkai taught in front of Rabbi Yochanan. Amar Lei, so he said back to him, Rabbi Yochanan said back to Rabbi Zakkai, Pok Tani Livra, go and teach this outside. That is not true. Rashi says, Pok Tani Livra de Tosu, that's a mistake. We'll come on before time of the Gemara as we go on. We'll explain the reason why that is a mistake. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Abba says, Hadi Amar Rabbi Zakkai, that which Rabbi Zakkai says, that it's one carbon chatos in this case, it's actually machlokas Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Nassan, it's actually a machlokas between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Nassan. The Tanya, because we learned in a brayso of the following machlokas Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Nassan, Havara lelav yotza divrei Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi says, when it specifies Havara, it specifies lighting a flame in terms of the malachas of Shabbos. Now, even though we learn out all of the malachas of Shabbos from the Mishkan, so why is it specifying just Havara, just burning? And so Rabbi Yossi says the reason is because it's lelav yotzas, it's not going to be chayiv misa. Havara is different than the other malachas. It is just a lav, it is just a lo saseh. Rashi explains Havara sheyotza michlal lo saseh kol malacha de Shabbos. There's already a general rule, don't do malacha, and again we learn out the malachas from the Mishkan. So why does it specify Havara? Lelav yotzah, that's for a negative commandment. Lohotzia mechomrei shar malachas. It's not as strict as the other malachas. Well, lelamed aleh she'ena lo bekares v'lo b'misa el b'lav. It's to teach that there's no kares for Havara, there's no death penalty for Havara. All there is a negative commandment. All there is a lav. That's Rabbi Yossi's opinion. Rabbi Nassan, Rabbi Nassan says lechalik yotzah. No, it was lechalik, and it means to say, as Rashi explains, lechalik lachlok v'lomer lach, to make a distinction and to say mazumi yuchedes shimeavos malachas hanasus b'mishkan v'chayiv ala kosu b'fnei atzmo. Just like this malacha is independent, the Torah is saying on its own that you're chayiv for Havara. Shapara lo levada, this one is specified on its own. Af kol shu av malacha, so too by any av malacha that's done on Shabbos and Mason behelamechad. If you do that with one lack of understanding, chayiv al kolachas v'yachas, you're going to be chayiv on every single one. They're distinct. You're going to bring multiple karbonos. Techol davar shoya bechlal v'yotzam and aklal. Anytime you have a general rule, but something is taken out of that general rule, lelamed, it's to teach lelamed al atzmo yotzam, not just to teach for itself. El lelamed al aklal kulo yotzam, it's to teach about a general rule. And so Rabbi Abba continues, Laman de Amar Havara lelav yotza, according to the one who says that Havara is lelav yotza, according to Rabbi Yossi, Hishtachavo nami lelav yotza. It's the same thing when it comes to Hishtachavo, to bowing. That's also specified in the Torah when it comes to Avodah Zarah. So also the reason why it's specified is to say that it's a lav, to say that it's a negative commandment. And Laman de Amar Havara lechalik yotza, the one who says that Havara is to be lechalik, to say multiple karbonos, Hishtachavo nami lechalik yotza. That's Rabbi Nassan. He would say also by Hishtachavo, by bowing, that's to say that there's multiple karbonos when it comes to Avodah Zarah. And Rashi explains, Hishtachavo nami lelav yotze, Hishtachavo also is lelav. L'kamon Omar, later on we're going to say, Shalosh Hishtachavos nemru be'azoras avodas kochavim, that there are 3 times bowing is mentioned and is warned about when it comes to Avodah Zarah. Achas l'shalo kedarka, one is to say that if you worship not in the normal fashion, l'chadam l'el, that we mentioned earlier. Azhara minayin tamad lomer lo sishtachaver, where do we have the warning from lo sishtachaver? V'achas l'chedarka, one is when that is the normal fashion. V'achas l'chalik, and then one of them is used l'chalik, again to say that you have to bring different karbonos, ma hishtachavo yuchedes ma'isa la'atzmo, just like hishtachavo, bowing is its own action, v'chayiv ala bi'atzmo, ba'atzmo, and there's an independent liability. Av kol avoda v'avoda b'shogeg chayiv ala chatas li'atzmo. So to every kind of service that is done b'shogeg, done by mistake, there's going to be a chatos. V'tana de Rabbi Zakkai sfira like Rabbi Yossi. Now the Tana of Rabbi Zakkai holds like Rabbi Yossi, that hishtachavo yisera lav l'chalik yotza, that this hishtachavo is not meant l'chalik, ela lamed alesh hi belav v'lo bekares. Rather, it's to teach that when it comes to bowing, there's a negative commandment, but there is no kares. Ve'in chatas al shagagas, and there's no chatas if it's done by mistake. Ve'ava b'shechayovin oleh misa. Now, even though there is a chiv of a death penalty, dagave skiluksiv vayishtachu lehem, because by stoning it actually says vayishtachu. Miu, nevertheless, says Rashi, mi kares u'mei chatas afka. There is no kares and there's no carbon chatas. Hilkach lo mashkachas krab avodas kochavim l'chalik. And therefore, the point is there is no pasuk, extra pasuk by avodah zarah to say this idea of l'chalik. And the Gemara continues, Maskif la Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef asks on Rabbi Abba's explanation that this is really a machlokas tanoim. Dilma ankan lo kamer Rabbi Yossi hasam havara lalav yotza. Maybe only over there by Shabbos, Rabbi Yossi said that havara is lalav yotza, that havara is meant for a negative commandment. The nafkale chilik malachos me'achas mehena, because there we already have a source for chilik malachos, a different source according to Rabbi Yossi. The source is from the pasuk of me'achas mehena. The Tanya, because we learned in a brayso, Rabbi Yossi Omer, Rabbi Yossi says, says. V'yasa me'achas mehena. The pasuk says he's going to do one of these. So pa'amim shechayiv achas al kulan. Sometimes you bring one carbon for many sins. Pa'amim shechayiv al kol achas v'yachas. And sometimes you're going to bring for each one. V'yam Rabbi Yonasan, and Rabbi Yonasan says, my time with Rabbi Yossi. What's the reason of Rabbi Yossi? Techsiv, because again it's written in the pasuk v'yasa me'achas mehena. It says v'yasa me'achas mehena, and we darshan as follows: achas me'achas hena mehena, achas shihena v'hena shiachas. As the Gemara will now explain, we have one from one, we have these from these, we have one which is these, and we have these which is one, and it means as follows. Achas, for example, what's one? Shimon. That would be, let's say a person writes the word Shimon. This is doing that on Shabbos. That would be a violation, again, which you would bring a carbon for. Me'achas, what does it mean, me'achas? It means shame mishimon. Let's say he wants to write the word Shimon, but he doesn't write the whole word Shimon. He just writes shame. He just writes those two letters. That also would be a violation. You bring a carbon. And Hena, what does the word Hena refer to? Avos. That refers to the Avos malachos, the primary malachos. And Mehena, what does Mehena refer to? That refers to Toldos. That refers to the malachos that are learned out from the Avos, the Toldos. And Achas Shehena, what does it mean, one which is many? That means Zadon Shabbos v'shigagos malachos. That means that the person knows it's Shabbos. That part was on purpose, but he makes a mistake in terms of whether these were malachas or not. And so in that kind of a situation, you have to bring a carbon for every single malacha. But Heina Shiachas, what does it mean, Heina Shiachas, where you just bring one carbon? That's by Shigagas Shabbos. That's where he makes a mistake in terms of Shabbos in general. V'zadin malachas, but he does the malachas on purpose. He's perfectly aware that these malachas are usher on Shabbos. He just made a mistake in terms of Shabbos itself. So there you're only going to bring one carbon. And the point is, Aval Hacha, but over here, when it comes to a situation of Avodah Zarah where we don't have another source for Chilik Malachas, we have another source when it comes to Shabbos, but we don't have that here by Avodah Zarah, so it could be everybody would agree that Hishtachava, that bowing is L'chalik, and everyone would agree again that you would bring multiple karbonos. And Rashi explains, again, Shigagas Shabbos v'zadin malachas. Let's say he makes a mistake in terms of Shabbos, but he knows about the malachas. That's where you bring one carbon. Rashi says the case is Yodeya shemalachas halalu asuros b'Shabbos. The person knows that these malachas are forbidden on Shabbos. Aval kasavar ein Shabbos hayom, but he thinks that today is not Shabbos. He doesn't realize today is Shabbos. So kula chadash gagahi. In that situation, it's all one shogeg. That's why you bring one carbon. And Rashi continues, the kuli alma l'chalak yotz. Again, Rav Yosef asked that it could be by Avodah Zarah. Everybody agrees that the reason why bowing is singled out is l'chalik, the hakol modim, the cholayotzim, and haklal alamin al haklal kulo yotza, because everybody agrees that if you have something singled out from the general rule, it's to teach about the general rule. Ilo nafkolon miduch da'achrisi, if that's not learned out from somewhere else. Umisham hachi, and it's for that reason, amar le poktani livra. That's why I said to him, go teach it outside. The afilu Rabbi Yossi, the point Rabbi Yochanan was making was, even according to Rabbi Yossi, chayiv al kol achas v'achas. You're going to be chayiv on every single action, every single way of worshipping the Avodah Zarah. But the Gemara continues and asks, Chiluk Malachas da Avodas Kochavim Nami, when it comes to Chiluk Malachas, that you should be chayiv multiple karbonos by Avodah Zarah as well, Tepekle Me'achas Mehena. Why don't we learn that out from the pasuk of Me'achas Mehena? And Rashi explains, Tepekle Me'achas Mehena, we should learn that out from Me'achas Mehena. Rabbi Abba Parach, this is a question on Rabbi Abba, who said you're chayiv just one carbon. Nihida Masnisin, Rabbi Yossi, Dishtachavo Lelav Yotza. Even if you're going to say that the source is Rabbi Yossi, that Hishtachavo is Lelav Yotza, and that's why you're just chayiv one carbon. But still we have another source that we should say l'chalik, that we should say you're chayiv multiple karbanos. We should learn it out again from this same me'achas mehena. Kedanaf kaleilu Rabbi Yossi b'Shabbos, which was Rabbi Yossi's source when it comes to Hilchas Shabbos. Because this pasuk of Yasa me'achas mehena is just written by carbon chatas in general. And so we should make the exact same drasha with reference to Avodah Zarah. Achas v'yasa achas sh'asa avodah shlema. That would mean to say you did a full avodah, could go on zibuach, for example, he sacrificed to the Avodah Zarah. Me'achas would mean v'yasa me'achas, could go on shachat simen echad, la'avodas kochavim. Me'achas would mean, let's say he did part of it, he just shechted one simen from the animal for Avodah Zarah. The eshkachon lehechsher gabe chadas ha'of bifnim, we find that is also considered a hechsher, that's also considered a proper preparation of the carbon by the chatas ha'of that's brought inside the mikdash. And so the point over here is that we do have a separate separate source, a different source for the idea that avodah zarah is lechalik, that we're going to say that there are multiple karbanos. As the Gemara again now continues, we should learn out as follows. Typically, me'achas mehena. We should learn out from me'achas mehena by avodah zarah as follows, as Rashi already began explaining. Achas is avicha, that the word achas means that you slaughter, you sacrifice for avodah zarah. Me'achas simen echad. Me'achas would mean you do just one simen when you shech the animal. And hena avos, so hena would refer to the avos, which would be zibuach, kitor, nisuch, v'shtachava. It would be like sacrificing, burning, libations, and bowing. And mehena, what would mehena refer to? Toldos. You could have toldos of serving avodah zarah as well. For example, shavar makeh lefanev. For example, let's say a person breaks a staff in front of the avodah zarah. Rashi says shavar makeh lefanev l'shem avodas kochavim. He does that as a way of serving the avodah zarah. The dami l'shchita, that would be a tolda because it's similar to slaughtering. Sheshover mefarakta, because there you're breaking the neck. And so here also could go into darka la'ovda makel. This would be in a situation where is the normal fashion of serving with a makel, with a staff. And so that could be what that means. That could be the tolda. And achas shihena, what is achas shihena? That would be zodan avodas kochav, and that would be when he knows about avodah zarah. V'shigagas avodos, but he makes a mistake in particular avodos, so then he would bring multiple karbanos. And hena shiachas, what's hena shiachas? That's shigagas avodas kochav, and that's when he makes a mistake in avodah zarah in general. V'zodan avodos, but in terms of the avodos, he knows about that. And so again, you could just learn it out from this particular source, and everybody should therefore say that lachalik, everyone should say that there's multiple karbanos when it comes to avodah zarah. But the Gemara asks, "Hi shigagas avodas kochavim." But when it comes to shigagas avodas kochavim, we can understand shigagas Shabbos, that he doesn't know today is Shabbos. But what does it mean that he makes a mistake in avodah zarah in general, but still knows about the different ways of worshiping avodah zarah? That's why the Gemara is asking, "Hi shigagas avodas kochavim hechidami." What exactly is the case of shigagas avodas kochavim? Ikosavar beis haknesesu v'ishtachavelo. If he thinks that what he's bowing to is a shul and he's bowing to it, harei libo lashamayim, so his heart really is to shamayim, to heaven, and therefore that would not be avodah zarah. Ela dechazin derota v'sagidlei. Rather, the case is he saw a statue of a king and he bowed to it, so he kiblo lef, he accepted that as avodah zarah. So mezedu. So again, that's on purpose. And ilo kible, if it's on purpose, of course, again, it's not going to be a situation where you're going to bring karbanos anyway. And ilo kible aleh, and if he didn't accept it as an avodah zarah, so lo klomo, so that's nothing. And so therefore, the Gemara says ela me'avo me'yira. So now you have to go back and say, what does it mean when it says shigas avodas kochavim? It would mean me'avo u'me'yira, and that would mean that the person is serving the avodah zarah from love or from fear of man. But hanicha li Abaya, but that would work out according to Abaya damar chayev, because Abaya says me'avo me'yira is a situation where you would be liable for serving avodah zarah. Ela Rava damar potter, but according to Rava, who says me'avo me'yira when it comes to avodah zarah is potter. Ma'ikol ameimar. So what are you going to say? Again, we still don't understand, even if we're learning this as the source, we still don't understand what shigagas avodas kochavim is. And so the Gemara continues and answers for Rava ela ba'omer mutter. Rather, what you'll have to say is we're talking about a situation of omer mutter, which means that the person basically says that avodah zarah is totally mutter. He's not even aware of the prohibition of avodah zarah, and that's what it means when it says shigas avodas kochavim. But if that's the case, it really is shigas avodas kochavim, and it's not zodan avodos. He doesn't know about anything. He doesn't know about particular ways of worshiping either. And we're going to say that the brisa means in that particular case he's chayav one carbon, but that's also a problem, because then tifsha, then we should be able to answer the boy minei Rava Meir of Nachman, the question that Rava asked of Nachman. Helim zev zev biyadomau. He asked the question by Shabbos. Let's say a person does not know about Shabbos, and he also doesn't know about the malachas, so he's shogeg on both. So the question is, what's the halacha? Is that a situation where you bring one carbon or multiple karbanos? So tifsha, we should be able to answer that question. De'eno chayev elachas, that the person is only liable to bring one carbon, as we're saying over here by the shigagas avodas kochavim. And the Gemara says to that halokasha, that wouldn't be so difficult. V'tifsha, we could just answer that question. And again, that is what the brisa means. And again, we are back to our question: shouldn't this be a good source to say the concept of lechalik when it comes to avodah zarah? V'yasa me'achas mehena. So how could Rabbi Abba say that you're chayav just one carbon? But the Gemara continues and says you can't really say that. Can you even say that these psukim are talking about avodah zarah? This v'yasa me'achas mehena. Can you really say it's talking about avodah zarah? Because over here in this parsha v'yasa me'achas mehena, it talks about the fact that the Mashiach, meaning to say the Kohen Gadol, he brings the carbon of a par, a bull, and by a nasi he brings a seir, he brings a goat. By a nasi by the president, by the king, and by a yachid, by an individual, he brings kispa u'seira. He's going to bring either a sheep or a female goat. Ve'ilu ba'avodas kochavim, whereas when it comes to avodah zara, Tanan we learned v'shavin shebeseira kiyachid, that everybody agrees that when it comes to the Kohen Gadol, he's going to bring like a yachid, he's going to bring a seira, and so therefore it cannot be that this pasuk of v'yasa me'achas mehena is talking about avodah zara. And the Gemara says to that, v'sulo midi, there's nothing further to discuss. Clearly, it cannot be the source. If there is a source for l'chalek by avodah zara, this would not be the source. And the Gemara continues, Ki aser Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda Amar, when Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda came, he said, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video, on Daf Samech Beis, Amid Beis.